CBC is in the first years. It's a good idea. Actually, all the systems that I've known have been good ideas. They have been meant to improve on the existing idea. But somewhere along the road, it has been spoiled. Those of us who were adults when 844 started, the truth of the matter is the exact intention of CBC was the exact intention of 844. But then, reaching somewhere, the 844 got spoiled. What spoiled the 844? What spoiled the 844 was that it reached a stage where pass mark was everything. We forgot everything. We forgot everything. It became now a competition. Which student would be leading in the country? Which student would be leading in the province? Which student would be leading in the district? Which student would be leading in the division? And which student would be leading in the school, especially primary school, standard 8. But when Moi started 844, I was working, not only working, but being a Form 6, I was in a position at least to understand and see what they wanted and if they succeeded. But then it reached a time when every year when the results were being released, and you'd find every teacher fighting to have his or her student or students be leading in the levels that I have just mentioned. That is where 844 iliharibikia. And the other thing that 844 was meant, because sincerely speaking, ask anybody of my age and above, they'll tell you that what we are being told about CBC is what we were being told about 844. Or to give you an idea of what I'm saying, what is the difference between Maisha number and Huduma number? Well, something like that. You'd take time to know the difference. But then you are being told that this one is better than the other one. Even if it is better, but the difference is so small. Now, the first teacher, because I've said there are 4 levels, the first teacher on earth, or teachers, were Adam and Eve. They taught their children. We have been having various educations since Adam's and Eve's time. When we talk of education, we talk of a formal, because we have this informal education, where in some Western countries, they call it homeschooling. You have seen my tape on Ambwere. He took a teacher and the teacher was just teaching him alone at home. So if you are a millionaire, you can hire a teacher who will teach you everything from the comfort of your house. We are talking of somebody who has been employed full-time to teach other people. So in the ones I know, the 4, I would call the first one Cambridge education. You have heard people say masomo ilikuja na Kiingereza. During the Cambridge education, where people like Mwai wa Kibaki went through, this is the time when Form 4 examinations in East Africa, I'm saying Form 4 education in East Africa, used to be printed in Cambridge University in England. It would come by plane, not plane, it would come by ship through Suez Canal and land in Mombasa. And those days, Swahili was not an examination paper. So you'd find geography, history, English, sciences were done in English, and they used to be brought through Suez Canal by a ship. That is why you hear people saying, Kizungu kililetwa na meli. Then from Mombasa, they would be brought by rail all the way to railway station. I remember when I was young, money was also being brought up in that way. I remember when I was young, the road from Polytechnic, GSU would come, bring whatever, if it is money or exam papers, which were coming from London. The GSU would cover the road from the railways. Hiyo daraja kwenda industrial area would be locked, people would not go there. Then if it is exams, the GSU would escort it up to Mutihani House, and if it is money, it would be escorted up to Central Bank. Mutihani House, the one we have now, is the third Mutihani House. The first one was along Fangano Street, opposite NAT, opposite Kenya National Union of Teachers. Next time you are visiting that area, especially if you are visiting NAT, look across the road. There is a shortcut that goes to bus station. Somewhere there is where the original Mutihani House was. The second Mutihani House was somewhere Hurlingham near the State House, which you know, and the third one Uko Bellevue area. So that is the Cambridge exam. It used to be conducted in, it used to be set in London, Cambridge University. Then you know, maneno ya Suez Canal, tension and whatever. One time, instead of the exam being done in November, there was tension and the ship had to go round to Cape Town. It went back to West Africa, Cape Town, Mozambique, up to Mombasa. That year, instead of the people sitting the exam in November, they sat the exam in March. Then the other team sat in November. That year, we had 2 exams, just the way we had 2 exams during Corona. That is history repeating itself. Now, when there was tension in the Middle East, and the exams had a problem coming from Britain, East African countries sat down and decided to form East African Examination Council. They set up East African Examination Council, which, when the papers that I sat East African Certificate of Education, the paper that somebody on the Ugandan border is doing, and a Ugandan border with Sudan, nowadays it's Southern Sudan, and the other person, a Tanzanian who is doing the exam on Ruvuma, is it Rufiji, just across to Mozambique, they would do the same exam at the same time, East African Certificate of Education. Then around 1978-79, the East African community broke, and East African Examination Council was part of East African community. We went for some time with the East African Examination Council, but Tanzania and Uganda had already started their own examinations. You can see my East African Certificate of Education is signed by a Mr. Kiwanuka from Uganda and Professor Mungai, who was the NEC chairman and later became the Vice Chancellor of Nairobi University. So that is how NEC started. My Form 4, I did East African Certificate of Education, and my Form 6, I did NEC exam, which was Kenya Advanced Certificate of Education. Now that one we have covered exams. Levels of education. During Cambridge time, the first level was Standard 1 up to 4. You could repeat Standard 4 as many times as possible until you passed an exam, which was called CEE, Common Entry Exam. Common Entry Exam, you did it at Standard 4. Now, when you have 3 or 4 schools neighboring, one of them, the most senior one, would have both Standard 1 up to Standard 8, but the other 4 or 3 would end up in Standard 4. So these schools that ended up in Standard 4, they were called primary schools. But those who ended up to Standard 8 used to be called such and such a primary and elementary school. Not elementary, primary and intermediate school. I've corrected myself. It used to be called primary and intermediate school. Let me give you an example. The late Chief Justice Chesoni went for his Standard 1 up to 4, primary that is, he went to Luandeti DEB. But when he went to intermediate, he went to Chebayo School. That is where he went. So you find that there were 3 or 4 schools. One of them had Standard 5 up to 8. That one was called intermediate. If you completed, and I've told you, because even I, when I was in primary, lower primary in Kajiado, we used to have people who were already adults and married as classmates. So if you ended up in Standard 4 and you had common entry examination, you join any profession. But if you are to join teaching, you would join teaching as a P4, primary 4. But if you went to intermediate Standard 5, you went up to class 8, Standard 8, where you did your, it used to be called, at first it used to be called KAPE, Kenya African Preliminary Examination. But later Jomo Kenyatta was not happy with the name African, so it was changed to KPE. So Standard 8 of those days, you either had KAPE, Kenya African Preliminary Examination, or KPE, Kenya Primary Education. In the late 60s, 67 and 8, the government decided to do away with Standard 8. So, 1967, 2 classes sat the same exam. Standard 7 sat the exam. Standard 8 sat the exam. If those who passed, irrespective of whether you're Standard 7 or 8, they joined Form 1. Those who failed, they either went to look for jobs or repeated. Now, if you are in 1967 a Standard 8 and you failed, you should repeat. Then you would repeat in Standard 7, 1968. 1966, you are in Standard 7. 1967, you are in Standard 8. And 1968, you are in Standard 7. What was the new exam? The new exam was called CPE, Certificate of Primary Education. That is now Standard 7. But when you completed primary, whether Standard 8 or Standard 7, whether it is KPE, KPE or CPE, and you wanted to join teaching, you would go and train in a TTC, and upon graduation, you see, wewe na mtu ambaye wa Standard 4, you'll be educated in the same class. But when you both of you graduate, who you are Standard 4 will be a P4, and you who has completed primary school is a P3. I'm telling you, those are the days when you could find somebody 18 years completing primary. But then, after completing primary, whether it's Standard 7 or 8, you joined secondary. There were 3 levels of joining secondary. There is the level that you wanted to be educated, but you did not perform well, or that is not a good language, or the chances were taken by people who performed better than you. So you would ever enter a private school. Those days, entering a private school, it was not the days of Kinamakini. So entering a private school was, let me not say so. And then there was the team that were joining. You know, you could be in an area where government schools were far. So locals would sit down, they would talk into one of them surrendering a few acres, and then they would build a school, and the school they would build it through Harambe. These were schools that were called Harambe schools. And Harambe schools were for people from around, and you'd find over 80% of the students were local. And if you wanted to be a teacher, and TSU would not employ you, it was easier to join as a UT, an untrained teacher on the Harambe stream. And that was the second. There was private, there was the Harambe, then there was government. Now, when you reached Form 2, if you are in a Harambe school or private school, it was mandatory for you to sit for an exam that was called KJSE, Kenya Junior Secondary Examination. If you were in a government school, which was neither private nor an Harambe, you were supposed to, you were not compelled to sit for Kenya Junior Secondary Examination. But when you wanted to sit for that, because if you failed in Form 4, you look for a job with primary certificate. So some people went and registered in nearby private or Harambe schools. On the exam day, you'll find 1 or 2 students dressed in government secondary school uniform. That was only as a backup. I said if you completed CEE, common entry exam, and became a teacher, you became a P4. Primary, you became a P3. Now, if your level of education was Form 2, Kenya Junior Examination, and you went to a TTC, you became a P2 teacher. You became a P2 teacher. And if you completed the Form 4, you would become a P1. So they have been, walifika pahali wakatoa P4, wakafika pahali wakatoa P3, wakafika pahali wakatoa hivyo hivyo imebaki P1. And as I'm speaking now, wameondoa P1. Students who are now joining primary teaching, they are going there for Diploma in Education primary option. Now that is what I said Form 4. Form 4, and I'd said initially it was Cambridge, then it became East Africa Certificate of Education, then it became NEC. East African Certificate of Education was for the Form 4. And when it was turned into NEC 1990, those who sat the exams in 1979 did East African Certificate of Education. Those who did in 1980 did Kenya Certificate of Education, KCE. You see, the other one was EA, standing for East Africa Certificate of Education. Now this one's what? Kenya Certificate of Education. Then later on, when 844 started, to differentiate between somebody who did Standard 8 and Standard 7, the one who did Standard 7 went around with a CPE. The one who did in Standard 8 went with KCPE. And then Form 4, the one who did the old system was KCE, Kenya Certificate of Education. But if you are a Form 4 who did, the 844, it was Kenya Certificate of Secondary Examination. Now, for those who went to Form 6, the class that I followed did East African Advanced Certificate of Education. This is EAACE. You remember Form 4 was a single A. And when it was removed and NEC took over, we did Kenya Advanced Certificate of Education. Now, when Moi was removing the 763, of course, those years after Form 6, we went to the university. Those who went to university, me, I never went. Those who went to university went there to do 3 years. And when you went to do 3 years, you used to be given 3 subjects. And if you are very good in a class, they would tell you to choose 1 subject for the second year. When you chose 1 subject for this, you dropped 2. And then the third year, you'd still do that one. So first year you do 3 subjects, second year you do 1, third year you do 1. That one we used to call them 311. And those are most of the people who got honors degree. But when you did your first year, and you are not sure of your career projection, or you are coming, the results sio kama za yule mwingine, it was compulsory for you to drop 1 subject. So the second year you'd do 2 subjects. There was no way you could go to second year with all the 3 subjects. You must drop 1 or 2. So if you dropped 1, at the end of second year, you would be assessed. Na kuna wengine, let me not call them ng'ombe, they would not be sure which subject what are dropped. Yote tu wana perform vibaya na hizi achia second year, so you would go to third year with 2 subjects. Those are the people mostly who got pass. But the person who got 311, 3 subjects, let's say you are doing physics, chemistry, and biology, and you are so good in the 3 or in one of them that the lecturers are very sure that utapata honors, then you pick one, you drop the 2. That is where you find when you are graduating, you get honors. But if you are an average, you would drop 1, let's say physics, and remain with biology, and remain with physics and biology and chemistry. You would end up having just a pass. I mean, a second class degree lower or something like that. But the person who yule alienda na 322, mostly walikuwa napata pass. That is why A-level was important, because it reduced you to do the subject that would lead you to university. When 844 came, the intention was that most of the students were bookwormers, and Moi wanted them even to know some basic subjects as home science, cooking and whatever, and even agriculture, kulima. You would find somebody graduating. Now the only thing he can, I'm not even saying she, the only thing he can cook is frying egg. So they were to be taught some things, arts and craft, vitu kama hizo, so that you do not basically believe in books. But when the competition came for exams, then everybody started fighting for, it became an exam out for people fighting to win, either individually or collectively. Now, from where I'm seated, CBC is like 844 at its formation. The only thing we need is, let us use that CBC. If you compare CBC with our system, you see, Moi added one class in primary. The current government has reduced so that primary is 7 years, but now they have 6, and 844 had 8. Secondary, we had 4. The current system, the CBC is having secondary, they're having 3 years. I would say it's okay, because some of the things we were learned in secondary, first of all, take the current students. Their IQ is better than ours, sincerely. So whatever we learned in 4 years can be crammed into 3 years. The other thing is, we were being taught some things in, for example, geography. We were taught about Al Jazeera irrigation scheme in Sudan. We were taught about alfalfa grass in Russia. We were taught about steppe ships in New Zealand. So 1 year was wasted, isn't it? It is good that it was, the secondary level is 3 years. The only thing I have a problem is calling it junior secondary, because you are reminding us of Kenya Junior Secondary Examination. Now we go to advanced level, the high school section. We go to the high school section, where, as I said, you'll be given 3 subjects. We were given 3 subjects to study for 1.5 years, because by the time we got our Form 4 exam results, and by the time we went to school, it was around May, June. So we went, Form 5 was half a year, and Form 6 was a full year, and it was an exam year. Placing high school for 3 years is okay. Someone will study well. If you look at 844, nikimalizia, if you look at 844, I want to give just 2 examples. You want to, or 3. You want to be an architect or an engineer. For you to get an engineer class in the university, you have to get at least an A-. For you to get A-, you have to pass languages. What has engineering got to do with the languages? Let us take a second example. You want to be a doctor, you have to pass. I saw this current class, people who wanted to be doctors and got an A-, all of them were taken A straight. So if you got an A-, you would end up in other fields. Now, for you to get an A-plane, you have to pass well in languages. Languages, I mean English and Swahili. So, kizungu yako itakufanyia nini if you are taken to Lodwa to treat Logones? So this idea of high school, Form 5 and Form 6, but then in the new system is grade 9, 10, grade 10, 11 and 12. This one wanting to be a doctor, you'll study 3 years, languages, history, and subject like that, and maybe government. And if you wanted to be a doctor, you'd spend 3 years in grade 10, 11, and 12. you would do biology, physics and chemistry throughout that time, so that ukiingia university umeiva, and then you become. Kindly tell somebody who is in the Ministry of Education or somebody who is interested in the history of our education to watch this tape. Thank you.